Inventor, teacher, leader, storyteller, Artist-Geek. Hi, I'm SanGiovanni, co-founder of the software company Zumobi. And I believe now more than ever that the economies of the future will be defined and led by these hybrids, these freaks of invention with a depth of experience in 2 or 3 or more domains of human knowledge. I contend that it's the wild cards in our background that make us unique, give us opportunity, and let us be able to see things that others might not see. Now, my first touch point with this philosophy happened in my very first job. It turns out that when you grow up in Orlando, Florida, you're afforded all kinds of interesting professional opportunities. Just to be clear, I'm that one. And the coolest thing about being a character performer for the Walt Disney Company is you get to go through their legendary orientation program. At the time, it was called Traditions. And it's all about this thing they call the guest experience. When a visitor to the park shows up, how do you surprise, delight, and engage them at every turn? One of the anecdotes I'll share with you is that they tell you that when you're in costume, you should smile for every picture, because even though the guests can't see your face, they absolutely can see the expression that was on your face through the costume. It radiates out into the park. And so I really enjoyed doing meet and greets as Pluto. And one day, I returned back to the break room, and there was this poster on the corkboard that simply said, "The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are coming to Disney." And I was like, the opportunity to be a superhero and get paid for it, that's awesome, done. So as it turns out, as you know, the Ninja Turtles are not actually Disney characters, but Disney licensed them in the early 90s for a stage show. So I didn't even read anymore. I'm like, I am there. So a couple weeks pass, and I'm all psyched up, and I show up to the audition, and I push the doors open, and something is terribly wrong. It turns out that I probably should have read the rest of the flyer, which said very specifically, important, all applicants must have a black belt in 1 or more martial arts, preferably with a focus in weapons exhibition. Dude, it was like walking into a Bond film, like that scene on the Evil Lair where all the henchmen are have weapons and are doing backflips and in their martial arts geese. And I show up in sweats and a t-shirt. I'm like, hi, I'm Pluto, And my martial arts experience consisted of one Aikido class at the University of Florida, So most people in their right mind would have just sort of gracefully exited the room at this point. But at this point, I was too mentally invested. I had to be a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle. So I sort of stealthily work my way to the back of the audition line, and I'm watching very carefully as the other performers are auditioning for the opening cast, and I'm looking at the little panel of judges that are making those selections, sort of some American Idol, Turtle parallel universe. And I noticed that the performers that are getting selected are not necessarily those with impeccable technique, but those who they feel could telegraph the spirit of a Ninja Turtle through a 40-pound costume. So I decide that if I have a chance in hell of getting this job, if these dudes are 10 out of 10 from the neck down, I've got to be 15 out of 10 from the neck up. So when it was time for my audition, it was ridiculous. I was like, lights off, And so when I got to the audition table, they had no idea what to do with me. They're like, this guy, his technique is terrible, but clearly he has the spirit and the soul of a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle. So I got the job. This is me with my parents. Those of you who know the Turtles will see from the blue bandana. You'll find it even more hilarious that they picked me as Leonardo, the leader. So this insight, my wild card was that I sort of knew what they were looking for, even though I was less qualified for the job. It turns out I was one of the only character performers that showed up to the audition because they actually read the job description. So that really gave me opportunity where I otherwise would not have had it. And in fact, this insight about the expression on your face, reading through to your users or your guests, even though they can't actually see your face, that's actually a really great metaphor for software and for startups in general. I love this quote from Corey May, who worked on one of the most successful video games of all time, AC3. He says, "It's my belief that the passion, or lack thereof, in a game actually leaks out. I think that it seeps into the cracks of a game and radiates outward. You can feel the love in a game or an app or a brand experience." And that brings me to my current company. So Zumobi is a 40-person technology company that builds advertising and publishing platforms for some of the biggest media companies and brands in the world. And in addition, we design and develop a whole host of apps on the app stores for moms and motorheads, news junkies and gamers, geeks and chefs. And this illustrates why I'm so passionate about hybrid learning, because app development in general is an incredibly multidisciplinary adventure. If I look at the DNA of the Zumobi tribe, it's made up of PhDs in sociology and computer science, experts in music and horses. We even have an ex-Marine. So in addition to making it a really fun place to work, it also lets us be able to have a very unique perspective on the marketplace. Now, most of the current educational zeitgeist would suggest that if you want to create more companies in rapidly growing segments like mobile, the way to achieve that is to focus on STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics. And this is important. I have a technical background, and I celebrate that. But a couple of thoughts. The first is that I seriously feel like we should invite the right brain to this party. And the second is, to be honest, I don't care what cute acronym we choose this 5 minutes in academia. What I care more about is actually the hyphens in between the letters. That's where the magic happens. It's these insights across domains. In fact, we could take a radial menu of a bunch of different domains of human knowledge, and if we draw intersections between any one of these, we'll find an incredible invention, or sometimes an entirely new industry will be born. The magic happens in that lattice in the middle. Now, my own personal and professional journey has taken me through many different disciplines: entertainment, architecture, design, human interface, computing, and education. I've shared sort of a whimsical story of my experience in education, but I'd like to now share a much more personal story about my journey as a designer and my experience in architecture. Everything that I know about design was started by my parents, who were co-founders of a liturgical architecture firm in the southeastern United States. That means that they designed churches and cathedrals up and down the coast of Florida. My father was the principal architect. My mother handled strategy and finance and marketing and everything else. And I remember this very specific thought that my father had when he was designing his first big church. You know, it turns out that when you're trying to design a big, gracious, open spiritual space in a humid climate like Florida, it's actually quite challenging to keep that space both gracious but also cool and comfortable to the congregation. So what architects end up doing is they have exposed ducts, or they have to have columns where they hide those ducts. And my father said to me, he said, whenever you're working too hard to conceal something in a design, you should do a design study where that thing is the centerpiece of the design. And that's exactly what he did. He sourced these massive wooden glue-laminated beams, 4 of them, and in between them, as the signature design element of the interior space, he had this air conditioning conduit that ran through the space. And not only did it create spaces that were very cool and comfortable, but it also created these beautiful sight lines so the congregation could have an unobstructed view of the altar. Now, I celebrated that, and actually, if you ever are in a church in Florida and you're not sweating, and look up if you see these twin spines, it's probably a church that my parents designed. And so now fast forward 20 years, I'm 3,000 miles away working at Microsoft Research, and I was working on a project to reimagine the home screen of a touchscreen phone, together with my longtime collaborator, Dr. Ben Betterson. And this was years before Android and iPhone and superphones. And at the time, we would shoehorn all the notifications into these 10 vertical pixels along the top of the screen. If you'd missed a phone call or a text message, we'd shoehorn it into that area. So I said, let's do a design study where we take that area and we make that be the entire screen. So what if, rather than these static launch icons, what if we had these living launch tiles that actually showed you what was happening when you were away from your phone? And not just email and weather, but as you drag around this Zoom space, you can glance at missing blog feeds and social media updates and Xbox Live notifications. And then, soon thereafter, the brilliant minds, Bill Flora and Will Vong and others in the Microsoft design team took their iconic Metro visual language and put that into the interface. So as it is, this is actually the home screen of Microsoft's phones and tablets and Xboxes to this day. So this specific insight between the realms of architecture and human interface gave me experience where I otherwise might not have had it and gave me an insight to be able to create that user interface. Now, this is a personal story, but it turns out it's not new at all or unique. Let's take a look at some historical figures. The Wright brothers. Now, yes, they were absolutely brilliant in the fields of aeronautics and engineering, but their wild card was that they ran a bicycle shop. And at a time when other aeronautical engineers were trying to invent a boat for the sky, they realized the importance of the human interface, that it was much more about balancing on the air. And it was that insight that changed the entire design of the aircraft and kept them aloft. Another one of my favorite examples is Marie Curie. She illustrates the point that it's not good enough to just be a jack of all trades and a master of none, but rather you should endeavor to be the master of some. So she actually won a Nobel Prize in physics in 1903, and then 8 years later, just for kicks, won a Nobel Prize in chemistry as well. And that created the foundation for an entire field of medicine called radiology. Amazing example. Probably the greatest example in our lifetime, of course, is the great Steve Jobs. I contend that if it weren't for his unique tapestry, recipe of brilliant passions, we wouldn't have the iPhone, arguably the most impactful consumer product of our day. And then lastly, once every 1,000 years or so, you get one of these. Da Vinci, man, the realm of his cross-disciplinary brilliance was like a veritable Death Star ray. Able to destroy any planet-sized problems in his path. So imagine with me a future where, rather than a resume being this linear, chronological account of your experience in a single domain, what if instead it was a visual heat map that illustrated the unique tapestry of skills and experiences that you bring to the table that others never could? That would completely transform the way we think about learning, the way we think about education, and the way we think about innovation. So I invite you, with me, to embrace the nonlinearity of the human experience. What's your wild card? What is it that you have seen or done or experienced that lets you be able to see things where others would not? And how will you use that insight to amplify your impact on humankind? Thank you for your time.